Okay, Nicole, I finally saw Invincible. Are you happy now?
But I am actually happy that my friend kept on persisting that I watch this show, as I'll come to explain why. Just a little backstory, I accidentally saw a short clip of the first episode because this was on the day that it had just come out. Was just scrolling through Facebook and it hadn't blown up on the internet yet, so I didn't know what I was watching. But thankfully, I didn't watch the clip in full, so nothing was really spoiled for me. So recently, I decided, yeah, I cannot procrastinate on this no longer. I have to watch the show. So, what is the show about? Well, in the world of Invincible, you basically have heroes and villains. Heroes, they may form different groups, such as the Guardians of the Globe. They are the best and most famous one, or they may act independently, such as Omni-Man, the strongest one on the planet. Now, Omni-Man is the person who will be following along with his son Mark. Now, Omni-Man keeps his identity a secret, obviously to protect himself and his family. So no one knows that Mark is actually the son of one of the greatest superheroes ever, but despite this, he hasn't developed any powers similar to his father yet. So that's got his parents worried a little bit. But the day when he does develop his powers, when they come out, that's what sets everything in motion. Now, why was this such an important event? You'll see as you follow along the story. Now, what I described to you, that was not even the complete first episode, that was less than half of it. The reason I cannot discuss anymore is that in that very first episode, there are some very, let's call them impactful scenes. What do I mean by impactful? Impactful? Well, you have a world filled with heroes and villains with different crazy powers, the show does not pull any punches. When it comes to the violence and action scenes, it's as gory as it can get. This is not one of those shows where the heroes are trying to be as conservative and humane as possible. Now, most of this gore and violence is for shock value, but there are a few instances as well where it's trying to deliver a message. When you see them in the show, you'll know what I mean. If I had to use an example, think of the movie Logan, for example. The R rating in that movie allowed you to completely see the suffering and pain that Wolverine goes through. And a few action scenes here have that same sort of idea behind them. And that's great. I love it when shows use that, when they use their R rating for more than just shock value. But in addition to the gruesome violence in the show, it also leaves an impact through the actions and choices of the characters in the show. Now you have some solid solidly established characters. What do I mean? I mean, you know who they are, what their goal is, what their attitude is. Now, this might give their choices some predictability, but there is still the consequences of their choices. How much pain and suffering they go through because of the choices they make, and how this can affect their other choices in the future. Will it change their behavior, their attitude? How will it change their image in the eyes of those around them? And then you have those who, just by their nature, are unpredictable and you are not sure of their agenda, what they're gonna do, what their goal is. So for those types of characters, the impact comes from the, well, shock and unpredictability of their actions, the way they come out of nowhere. Now, all of these, it would be not that much meaningful if there were about characters we were not invested in, but that's not the case as I'll talk about. That's what the show does great. It has its action and all of that, but it also has the actions and consequences. These two go hand in hand in this show. So the actions they may lead to violence, and then the violence may lead to different choices by our characters. It's a very interesting cycle and chain of sequence that they've built in the show. And now we come to the characters. There are a lot of characters in this season. But thankfully, everybody plays a role. And by play a role, I don't mean, for example, this person is for exposition or this person is for comic relief. No, everyone attributes to the story in one way or another, either to the big overall story or to their own story or the stories that might expand that episode or maybe two. So everyone has a role. No one is there in the show without proper reason. And in addition, everyone is a fully realized three-dimensional characters. Perhaps at the top of my mind, I cannot think of any person who was completely 2D cupboard cutout. Everyone had a fully realized three-dimensional character. By that, I mean they are more than a gimmick or more than a punchline or more than one goal they have in their mind. There is always more to every character than you might realize at first glance. Now, obviously, for our main players, for the main characters, this goes on another level. They become this complex, they have these complex characteristics with layers to them. Every person in the main cast, all of the main characters, they all have their own insecurities, goal, goals, doubts, uncertainties, attitude, behaviors. The main cast are absolutely shining when it comes to characteristics and life. And this is elevated more by the dialogue that is written between these characters. The dialogue always feels natural considering who is involved in the dialogue and the situation they're in. There was not one dialogue where I was thinking, no, this character would not say this. Why is this character saying that? It doesn't make sense. Not one. It completely felt natural. As a result, you become invested in pretty much all the characters. Even the characters whom you may not like, you still believe their existence and accept them as part of the life of the characters you are invested in. That's pretty cool. That's what the show does best, to be honest. And then you have the story itself. I'm just gonna talk about it in general without any spoilers. The story was full of intrigue. Like I said, there are a lot of unpredictable characters that add a lot of unpredictability to the story, but there is a big actual twist towards the end of the season, which I saw coming from early in the season. It just felt predictable. I don't know, maybe because I've seen similar stories before, but it wasn't that big of a surprise for me where the big twist happened. But again, the characters come and save the situation because even if you know a twist is coming, what you don't know is the reaction of the characters to that twist. And again, the consequences that the twist will have for the characters you've been invested in. Now, that said, there are still some cliches in this season, let's call them. You know, when he develops his powers, he has to learn how to use them, and he has to learn how to balance his normal life and then his superhero life, and then his father will lecture him about his responsibilities and how that's a lot more important than his normal school life. This will affect his relationship with his girlfriend. The girlfriend is not going to be happy when he keeps on leaving, blah blah blah. Now it makes sense for the cliches to be here. So you have a hero developing their powers, they're gonna have some time learning about them and learning to balance things. But again, still a cliche. It's done well, but still a cliche. But there were some other elements to the story which I did not like. You have a lot of teenage superheroes in this show, and there are some like teenage drama stuff, like high school drama, the type of thing you would see in those movies. Again, it was done in a decent way to build up our characters and all that, but I just thought it was a bit unnecessary. This not exactly a love triangle, but something like that. I just wish that was like not completely taken out, but I just wish we had spent less time on it. Now, before I finish this review, I'm just gonna do some bullet points of other things about the show. First of all, the finale itself is worth it. The finale itself, that the stuff that happens in the finale, literally during the entirety of that last episode, my jaw was on the floor. It was one of the most crazy things I've ever seen. Just the finale, okay? Second of all, the voice cast is full of stars actually. I was really surprised, but perhaps the standout for me and for everyone else was, of course, the legend himself, J.K. Simmons as Omni-Man. They even have a matching mustache. It was bound. This is destiny. And then, what else? Right, the animation itself is not the most detailed or the most. It is consistent, but it's not the most detailed. Considering the stuff they have to do and budget constraints, it's understandable, and you're not gonna notice it unless you really pay attention or you pause a frame and just look at it. You're not gonna notice. Hi, this is me from when I was editing the video. So I realized that's a bit unfair to say that it's not as detailed. Well, let me clarify. It is not as detailed as other animes when you talk about every frame. Do you know what I mean? There are some absolutely stunning and beautiful shots, not just of violence, but other scenes in the show, which are absolutely beautiful. But overall, it's not as detailed as other animes or cartoons. And last but not least, what they did with the title card at the beginning of each episode and how it happened is pretty cool. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. So all in all, this was a pretty good show. I'm very much looking forward to the second season. The first season had a solid story, but it left a lot for the future, and I'm really looking forward to it. And like I said, apart from like very few small issues, the show in general was absolutely great, and I highly recommend that you watch it.